I'm telling y'all, this is just not going, this is just not going well. And you know why? Because you keep screwing around and not getting to the freaking story. Well, let's get to the freaking story, huh? Alright. This is an event from the life and times of Mr. Vane. We're going back to the year 1992, which is the end of the school year, 91-92, Mr. Vane's junior year of high school, which took place at Moreno Valley Rancho Verde High School's, what's the word? Premiere year, opening year, its first year, its inaugural year, however you want to look at it. It was Moreno Valley Rancho Verde High Schools, which we're going to shorten to RVHS, or just Rancho, for the remainder of this electronic, visual, audio, social media message. Okay. That year, since it was the first year of Rancho Verde, all of Rancho Verde's athletic teams were unestablished. Pretty much meant anybody had that much more of a chance of getting on a team. So during spring 1992, when spring events begin, which typically include baseball, softball, track and field. I think tennis, but I can't say for sure. Maybe. Tennis? Yeah, tennis? Anyone for tennis? Anyway, doesn't matter. Mr. Vane wasn't playing tennis anyway. Track and field. Pretty much every athletic-prone student at Rancho that year who was not participating in one of the other sports, baseball, softball, ended up going into track and field. Even people who didn't do organized high school sports previously were showing up, Mr. Vane included. Mr. Vane was not fast enough to be a sprinter, so he ended up at first doing hurdles and long distance, which in track and field, long distance is a mile or 2 miles. Sometimes half a mile. Sometimes not. And then there's the controversial, quarter mile, which is 1 time around the track, but that's usually considered a sprinting event. It's considered the longest of the sprinting events. However, sprinters weren't always enthused to want to join that event, so Mr. Vane ended up doing it quite often. As well as in track and field, as some of you may not know, each athlete is limited to participating in only 4 events. And which breaks down to coaches limiting their athletes to no more than 3 events, as to not exhaust the student athlete, as well as to keep them in a position of substitution if the need arise. Now, during the season of track and field, there are 2 typical types of events. There are league events, which are, as the name suggests, a school, 2 to 4 schools maybe, usually just 2 schools pitted against each other up from the same league in a head-up competition. Then the other one is called an invitational, and these typically see schools from around a large region, multiple schools, a lot of schools, typically 20 plus, participating in events throughout the day. And it was at one of these types of events where our story really begins, and for the most part takes place. Now, the 4x100 relay run is done by 4 runners. Each runner does 100 yards around the track, which is quarter of the track. resulting in one complete lap by an entire team. Okay? Well, however it happened, the sprinting team found themselves short one runner during, or to participate in the 4x100. All the other sprinters, they were in other events, whatever. Anyway, short one runner. The sprinting coach inquires to the long distance runners, who of course are long distance endurance as opposed to fast sprinters. Goes over to the group of long distance runners and inquires of them who is the fastest long distance or endurance runner. And oddly enough, it was Mr. Vane. He wasn't the fastest endurance runner, as in there were other endurance runners who would get first place before he would. However, in the short run, the sprint of the endurance runners, Mr. Vane was the fastest. And so that was where he was needed, his sprint speed. Too slow to be a regular sprinter, but fast enough to outsprint the rest of the long distance runners. So, coach asked him to join the sprint team for this one event, in which he would have to start the race. He would be the starting runner. That way he would not have to worry about receiving a baton, because the handoff of the baton during, well, any relay race is one of the most critical moments. Many races are lost at bad handoffs, during the handoffs, dropped batons, whatever. So, Mr. Vane was given the position of starter. That way all he had to concern himself was the handoff. And of course the technicalities of starting in blocks and having to anticipate and react to the starting pistol, etc., etc. A lot of technical things. But fortunately, Mr. Vane was accustomed to all that. So, their race, Rancho's race, there were several heats, and each heat had a full capacity on the track, 8 lanes, all lanes being used. Marks, get set, go. Mr. Vane goes, takes off, flying out of the tracks, flying out of the blocks, gets to the handoff, makes a clean handoff, and that's it. Everything happened so fast and was so sporadic, and the whole event and everything was so crazy, and so many teams were going on. Mr. Vane didn't even know how the race ended. Still to this day, we do not know what place Rancho came in that event that day. Turns out it's irrelevant to this story. What the hell are you doing? Getting to part 2. Getting to part 2. Really, you're just making noise on this thing, aren't you? Yes, I am just making a bunch of noise on this thing. You want to get to the story? Alright. Here's what happens. Sometime 2 weeks or so later, after this invitational had happened and all that had gone down, and Mr. Vane didn't know what was the result. Whatever. Never heard about it. Mr. Vane was taking Algebra 2 during his junior year. And eventually he found out it was a class he didn't even need in order to graduate. He had already fulfilled his mathematical obligations, which is a good thing because he was failing the class anyway, just like over 75% of the other students who had the same teacher were doing. Yeah, 75% of the school that was taking this class from one specific teacher were failing. Yeah, your guess is correct. If you're thinking what you're supposed to be thinking, yes, you're correct. It was determined to be that reason. Bad teachers make failing students. Anyway, so Mr. Vane and another classmate of his decided there was no point in going to that class that day. And Rancho at the time had a policy of if you were late to any class by any margin, the bell rang, you were late, you had to go to on-campus detention, which was basically the school's way of keeping kids from ditching out of school because they were late to a class. But there's really no permanent real damage to it for as far as student records, things like that. You were late to class. You had to go to another a substitute classroom. Basically, it was just a way to go to a substitute classroom. All that's irrelevant. What's important is that day, Mr. Vane and a fellow student decided there was no point to going to their Algebra 2 class because it wasn't necessary. So they decided, like so many students did back in the time, let's just go to OCD because it was more or less just a get out of jail free card in so many respects. You didn't have to go to a class you didn't like. You hung out in a class doing pretty much whatever you wanted. Well, not so much whatever you wanted, but you didn't have to deal with a class that you didn't want to be in. Now, the class was run by duty aides of the school. Not actual teachers, but staff members. And staff members were typically assistant coaches or coaches for athletic programs. And that was the case that day. One of the coaches of the track and field team was overseeing the class that day. Actually, I believe it might have been two coaches, but that's irrelevant. What is relevant is this. At the end of the class period, the coaches have to give, or the supervisor of the class has to give each student that attends an excuse note so that the next day or whenever they can present that note to the teacher and saying, yeah, they were here, but they were in da-da-da, OCD, da-da-da, whatever, OC. They were not ditching. Anyway, so the coach, the supervisor of the class, comes over to give Mr. Vane his readmission slip. But he stops, and he looks at Mr. Vane, and he's taken aback. He goes, oh, you're the guy who started that 4x100 that day, a couple weeks ago. Spain, yeah. Oh my God, this is basically what he said. All of the sprinter coaches that were watching, and of course, holding their breath because they were relying on a endurance runner to start their race. And how that starting person does is very critical to the race. And apparently, Mr. Vane impressed the crap out of everybody, because the way he exploded out of the blocks and pretty much kept pace with most every other runner on the track around him. Of course, even surpassing several. No, he wasn't the first, he wasn't in the front, but he wasn't in the back. He was keeping his own, made a good explosive boom out of the blocks, made the handoff, gave his team a chance. That's what it came down to. He gave his team a chance. He put everything he had into it. He didn't shy down away from the challenge when it came up to him. Gave his team a chance, and that's all I asked. He still didn't find out what place he came in, but you know what? At that moment, he was just, as he put it, and so would Eeyore, thanks for noticing me. And that's the point to this whole story. When you were asked, when you were in the position to assist your group, your team, whatever, whoever, the best thing you can do is use all the skills and knowledge you have on whatever it is you're doing. Put them to the best use you can. Put your abilities to top use. And do whatever you can to help your team. And that is all anybody on any team should really ever ask of anybody else. Ask of and commit to the best, the absolute best you can put forth. Right? As in, I put forth a lot into just this one freaking message right now. Like, seriously. This message is probably hopefully less than 15 minutes. Either way, it's taken nearly an hour, if not more, just to get this 15 minutes. And you're going to see something? No cuts. Not even in here. Oh, before we go, at the end of this, after I leave, I'm going to walk away. We'll show you you know what, let me show you right now. Just real quick. Do this. Yep, that's right. 1991-92, Rancho Verdes, very first year track and field team. That's not even all the team members. There were a lot more. That's just what showed up for picture day. We'll put up at the end, close up for that. Okay, Mr. Editor? That way you don't have to cut anything. Let's get out of here. It's freaking hot! Great. 18 minutes long? You're such an idiot.